Welcome back to Building Out Loud with me, Randy,
Nice.
and we left last episode on a cliffhanger. We're back this week to take a look at what you've been working on. You showed us the original version of what you were working on. In fact, you also left us on another cliffhanger. You said you had to pick a name, but you didn't share the name either. So let's start off with, what is the current name of the app?
Yeah, okay, the big reveal. I've named it Discoveree with two E's at the end instead of a Y. I kind of wanted the name to reflect one of two things. Either this is the stage, it's helping PMs do a certain job, or the discussion we had at the end of the last episode around linking it through to commercial goals, customer value. And as a product team, what are we trying to achieve? So we were playing around with ideas on those two fronts. It just seemed like the obvious answer. So Discovery is it.
And when we left in the last episode, you showed us the initial in Lovable, but you ultimately decided not to go forward with Lovable, and you went to start building in Replit. And you're going to show us that in just a minute or two. But why Replit, and what's the difference been?
So Lovable's really good at building a really simple, what I would call a clickable prototype. More recently, Lovable has introduced a feature where it can create the database, but it wasn't working the way I wanted to. I just didn't find it reliable enough. I did look at, as you know, a number of tools. One that was quite promising was called Solid. They're early stage still. Their whole proposition is they build it using agents, but in the way a developer would build it. And I really liked that principle, but the actual platform is too early. It's not fully featured enough for what I wanted to do. The challenge with B2B or enterprise apps, not only do you need to be able to store information in a database, but you need to be able to do things like user authentication and connecting into APIs, sending notifications. A lot of the platforms aren't quite there yet. Replit was able to cover those things. I could also connect into GitHub. So I had the code base and could transfer it to Cursor if I need a developer to work on it. It just felt a bit safer as a starting point that I was comfortable with, but it could be turned into a working product quite easily.
Okay, let's see where you've gotten to.
There's definitely still work to be done here. It is still a working version. If you want to create a new product, it takes you through an onboarding flow where it asks questions around what markets do you operate in, who are your competitors, who are your adjacent products, what are your business goals and your product teams. And so it uses that to then set up the structure of the application. A lot of businesses have more than one product. You can set up multiple products within the organization and assign which users have access to which products. So it is a little bit more robust. The way I've organized it is quite different. Rather than looking at what are your competitors doing, feature feedback or customer feedback as separate things, I came to the conclusion that all of those are just inputs to identify your opportunities. What we want to know is, what are the opportunities? These are AI generated, but as a team, you can also create your own opportunities. Within those opportunities, it's really about the evidence behind those.
I'm sorry, you said those are AI generated. It's based on the feedback, and it's doing a first triage and suggestions of what the opportunities might be. Is that the case?
Yeah, exactly. So what it's done is gathered the feedback on the publicly available platforms, also what competitor solutions in this space. It's used that as evidence to say this is an opportunity or something that you could do to improve your product. Likewise, as a team, if you create an opportunity, it will use agents to find supporting evidence.
So I can see you've got an example here based on an organization that you used to work with. You're familiar with the opportunity space and the thinking, at least from a while back. How good did it do? How reliable were those AI generated opportunities?
When I first did this and created the agent, I was like, oh, actually, those sound quite reasonable. Those are things that we had to work on. But then when you looked into it, if I click on the feedback, the link doesn't actually work. So I'm still not confident that this is working exactly how I want it to work. But I also haven't published it yet. So I'm wondering if that maybe has something to do with it. The sentiment scoring has improved though. Not only does it capture the feedback, it actually gives it a sentiment score. I have refined that agent quite a bit now, and I've spoken to some colleagues who have worked on other platforms that have sentiment scoring and learned from their experiences. So it actually goes through a multi-step process to not only look at the feedback, but then identify different products that they might be referring to within that comment or different features, and then looks at the comment in relation to each of those things before assigning the score. So it's a much more robust scoring system. And I've set that agent up to do that centrally so it's consistent across all the different areas in the platform where we've got sentiment scoring.
Fantastic. So, what have you learned from doing it this way? What else has evolved?
Yeah, there's been lots of things. So some of the review platforms have APIs that you can connect into to pull the feedback directly. So G2 is a good one for that. I have actually got it talking to the API now. We use Gemini to do the web scraping. Gemini is the best at that, being a Google product. You can actually add a team member now. It sends the invitation. I can then accept that invitation and join the organization and the product. So there's still a lot more work to be done. We want to make this a lot more dynamic. Within the product teams, it identifies the opportunities. You can then turn those into activities in your plan. I can do now, next, or later, and the amount of time investment I think this will need. If I go into our product team plan, you can see there the ticket.
You built out quite a bit here, and part of it is because you can. One of the things I've learned in our conversations, and I've learned from you over the years, is your approach to make things the lowest possible risk, make sure that they actually are going to deliver value before you spend time and effort on it. How have you done that with this? How much of this is play, and when do you get into validation? And
Yeah, it's a good question because I did jump straight into building something. The first version, the Lovable prototype, I did share and I got feedback. A lot of that feedback was actually more ideas, more features I could do. Like, you know who our competitors are, you know who our adjacent products are. Yes, you've identified the opportunities, but what about some moonshot ideas, something more innovative or different, which is a great idea, but probably not MVP. When I spoke to Ed Biden before I started the Build with AI course, I told him about my idea and he was like, stop work. This is still a product. You need to validate whether or not people have this pain, whether they want a solution for it, whether they're willing to pay for it. And so I have had 7 conversations now with different product leaders and had some really interesting feedback and input. One of the most important of those is a conversation I had with Fernanda, who's currently the VP of product at Clio, about the topic we were just talking about, sentiment scoring. And sometimes that's not very reliable. And how do you deal with that so people don't just give up and switch off the platform? One of the things I'm now thinking about is how do we make this more of a toolkit where you're giving the base plate to product teams, but they can then make changes themselves. So you can see here the list of all the agents that I've built. You can see what model we're using. You can see the prompt. You can actually edit the prompt if you want to. You can also see where it's run and what it's done.
so this is where you are today. What's next? What's the next thing on the Kanban board?
There's still a lot to do to finish refining this. I've been focusing on getting the opportunities and the agents working well. The idea is that you use all the context. So you've got the user story or the PID already written for you. You can share that into Jira. The bit that I need to think a lot more about is exactly what we're talking about is that goal setting and the OKRs and how you make sure that anything that product teams are working on is deriving commercial value as well as customer value. Different organizations do goals in different ways and it needs flexibility. But it can also do the hard work based on the impact on goals that you think that initiative will have, as well as your time investment. Is this a good return on that team's time and capacity? And giving a structured way of being able to monitor that. Every product organization I've worked in, that has been a really difficult thing to understand and have visibility of.
It's interesting to hear you talk about. I still need to add more flexibility here. I want to do more customization there. I have a feeling that if I was asking you for advice on something, you'd tell me to focus, to test it with an ICP and get one thing going, and then add that kind of additional functionality once you validated a single flow. How do you feel when I throw that back at you?
It's such a good challenge. And it is something that I've gone back and forth on so many times. It's like, what's the MVP here? I started out wanting to gather all the feedback from all the sources. And actually, from a technical perspective, it's far easier to start with just pulling publicly available information together. I haven't yet got the ability to integrate it into your internal tooling and pull your internal feedback as well. But I do think just pulling the data together is useful. I think that needs to be within the context of actually what are you trying to achieve for it to be really valuable. One of the strong themes I've heard when I've spoken to different product leaders is if you could help me make sure that my product teams are always working on the most valuable things, that's why we exist. And so that's where I want to get alignment set up.
And it sounds like you need to prove the feasibility and the viability before you do the extensibility in this case.
You're absolutely right. I should get more people onto this and using it and actually testing whether or not the agents are pulling useful information together or it's just slop.
Well, being that it's publicly available information, you can do it both with actual customers and you can simulate customers and do things in advance. So that's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. But I think we are just about out of time for today. So we will come back very soon to see where you've gotten with the next step in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll start following up with actual users and feedback.